You cough once in a crowded elevator, and every stranger inside quietly leans away without even thinking about it. That instinct feels like something built for overcrowded cities and packed subways. But the real story behind that fear is far stranger than that. It doesn't start in a city. It starts in almost total isolation, thousands of years before a single city existed. Around Lake Baikal in Siberia, small groups of hunter-gatherers lived in tight, scattered communities. No rats, no crowded streets, just a handful of families, hunting along the same river and burying their dead in the same ground for generations. In 2026, a research team led by Ruarid MacLeod and senior scientist Esk Willersleff pulled ancient DNA from the teeth of 46 people buried in 4 of those cemeteries. What they found rewrote the timeline of one of history's most feared diseases. Nearly 40% of those bodies carried traces of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the Black Death. 40%. For comparison, when scientists screened remains from a real medieval plague pit in London, only about 20% showed infection. A tiny hunter-gatherer group, buried 5,500 years earlier, was hit even harder than a crowded city at the height of an epidemic. So how did a disease everyone associates with rats and fleas tear through people who had neither? For years, most scientists assumed it couldn't have. Earlier plague genomes showed the bacteria was missing key genetic tools, the ones that let it hitch a ride inside a flea's gut and jump efficiently from host to host. Those tools weren't thought to exist until around 3,800 years ago. Before that, the thinking went, plague was probably mild. Uncomfortable, maybe, but not a killer. This new DNA proved that thinking wrong. Digging into the bacteria's genome, the researchers found something the earlier assumption never accounted for. A feature called a superantigen. Think of it as a hijacked alarm switch inside the immune system. Instead of your body fighting an infection in a slow, controlled way, a superantigen tricks it into attacking everything at once, all over the body, all at the same time. That overreaction is often what actually kills a person, faster than the infection itself ever could. This early plague didn't need fleas to be lethal. It was already built to overwhelm a human body on its own. But was that true everywhere, or just at this one unlucky place on the map? You might be thinking this was just one unlucky village, a single outbreak that happened to turn violent by chance. But the evidence doesn't stop at Lake Baikal. Back in 2015, a scientist named Simon Rasmussen sequenced ancient plague genomes pulled from burial sites scattered across Europe and Asia. Every sample dated to roughly the same window, around 5,000 years ago. The bacteria kept turning up again and again, in communities that had no contact with each other and no reason to share a disease. Rasmussen's find mattered because it meant this wasn't a one-off mutation that appeared and disappeared in a single place. The same lethal strain, or close relatives of it, had already spread across a huge stretch of the ancient world, long before anyone had built a city large enough to explain how a disease could travel that far. And in Sweden, one case makes the picture even stranger. Archaeologist Nicholas Raskoven found plague DNA inside a farmer buried at a site called Fralsgarden, dated to almost 4,900 years ago. His research connects that single death to something historians already knew about but couldn't fully explain: a sudden, mysterious decline in Neolithic farming populations across Europe. Entire regions of early farmers vanished from the archaeological record around that same time, for reasons nobody could pin down. Raskoven's discovery suggests plague may have quietly been part of the answer. So somehow, the same disease was moving through hunter-gatherers in Siberia and farming villages in Sweden, thousands of miles apart, during almost the exact same stretch of centuries. How does a bacterium with no fleas and no rats travel that kind of distance? The Lake Baikal researchers found their answer close to home. These hunter-gatherers regularly hunted marmots, large burrowing rodents that still carry plague in the wild today, even now. The bacteria most likely jumped from animal to human during a hunt, or while skinning and preparing the meat back at camp. No rats needed. No fleas needed yet. Just a hunter, an infected animal, and one moment of close contact. Once the disease reached a family group, it moved fast, and it moved through people who trusted each other completely. It's fair to wonder whether relatives just happened to die around the same time for unrelated reasons: old age, an accident, a hard winter. But by reconstructing the family trees hidden in the DNA, the researchers showed the outbreaks spread person to person, not just from animals. That distinction matters. A disease jumping once from a marmot to a hunter is bad luck. A disease spreading afterward from that hunter to his parents, his children, and his neighbors is something closer to what you'd recognize as an actual epidemic, playing out inside a group small enough that everyone knew everyone else. The evidence points to two separate outbreaks at Lake Baikal, one stretching from roughly 5,600 to 5,300 years ago, and a second nearly 2 centuries later. In both, entire families died together, parents and children buried within the same short window of time. Children between 8 and 11 years old made up a striking share of the dead, likely because that superantigen overwhelms a developing immune system faster than a grown one. Here's the part that should feel unsettlingly familiar. Long before agriculture, long before cities, long before any of the conditions doctors usually blame for outbreaks, small groups of humans were already living through something you'd recognize instantly. A disease moving quietly through the people they trusted most, inside the walls of their own family, with nowhere to create distance from the person right beside you. That instinct you feel in the elevator, the urge to step back when a stranger coughs, it has almost nothing to do with crowds. It has everything to do with closeness. Your ancestors learned that lesson in near total isolation, thousands of miles from the nearest city, in the very first recorded chapter of a fear you still carry every time someone steps a little too close.